You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined by Oliver Camacho and guest panelist Benjamin Sokol. All right, this week, we handicap the big game between New England and Seattle the best way we know how. Opera Company cage match. And then, Denyce Graves takes a free throw on portraying opera's strongest and most powerful women while being a vulnerable human being with a tender heart. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, Roberto Alagna seems to have lost more than his wives, and the Kennedy Center is just losing. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. Click follow on Apple Podcasts. Hit the plus sign. You can also stream episodes of OBS every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central at amplisoundsradio.com. Email us your hot takes by writing to mailbag at operaboxscore.com or upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. And without further ado, Oliver Camacho, the big game's coming up. The big tennis game, that is.
Well, we have to talk about the Australian Open semifinals day on Friday was one of the best days in tennis history, and it completely messed up my sleep schedule for the weekend. The final was scheduled for 2:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, and I came home from all the stuff I was doing on Saturday night and set my alarm for 2:30 so I could get up and watch it, and I totally overslept. But I managed to not be spoiled. I didn't look at my phone. I opened up my DVR with like this so that I could just start the game without really seeing, because you learn a lot of things just by like game length and stuff like that. So I wasn't spoiled. I got to enjoy Alcaraz becoming the youngest person ever in the Open era, male, to complete the career Grand Slam, winning on all 4 surfaces: Australia, France, England, and America. Those are the only surfaces we have. Those, and it was such a great story. I mean, like, Djokovic is always like the villain that can threaten so many things, and I know we should celebrate Djokovic for his accomplishments. I just somehow don't like him. We all know this by now, and so I was really happy to see Carlos become something very special in the history of tennis. He's already special, but he needs to have his own record so that we remember how great he is. And he's still got so much career ahead of him. It's going to be so exciting to continue to follow him. But it was a great weekend. There was other reasons why it was a great weekend, but it started my Sunday off in just a fantastic way.
Well, our guest, his eyes have glazed over because of all the tennis talk, but that's okay. Benjamin Sokol, welcome to the podcast. You're a member of the Ryan Opera Center, and you're currently in Lyric Opera Chicago's production of Salome as the 5th Jew, specifically, if I must use the exact cast terms. Welcome to the show, Benjamin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Do you have any opinions about tennis? That's the real pressing question I have right now.
So, I didn't grow up with tennis as one of my big sports, but, I grew up as a big Federer fan and Andy Murray. But tennis was never really my sport. I was more into basketball, baseball, and football.
He's tall.
I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'5", and I was always put as the center on the basketball team, and I did a good amount of pitching. My parents wouldn't let me play football because a lot of head injuries, but I've always loved football, and I grew up in Boston, so it's part of the culture. You just like, even if you don't know anything about sports, you're just a Boston fan.
Boston sports!
Yeah! Right out of the womb.
All I know about Boston is that you park your car in the Harvard Yard, or so I'm told. We have a lot to talk to you about, specifically regarding, your time at Ryan Opera Center, but we have you on mainly as a sports consultant, specifically because the big game is coming up this weekend. We'll talk about that in a second, but first, what's your experience been like at the Ryan Opera Center and doing this production of Salome?
Oh, it's been a dream being part of the Ryan Opera Center. Center, especially straight out of school. I went to Manhattan School of Music for 7 years, studying with world-renowned bass baritone James Morris, and it really set me up for success, being at Manhattan School of Music and then going to the Marola Opera program in 2024. And I just couldn't ask for a better entry into this opera crazy world. The instruction at the Ryan Opera Center is just, it's special beyond words. Julia Faulkner, Dan Novak, Craig Terry, just to have the power trio. It's just amazing to work with them every day. And
putting Zalame on your resume, like right out of the gate. That's insane.
Wild.
right out of the gate, just to have, German opera be on there. And also, I'm Jewish. So like
Sokol is a Jewish name?
There's a little bit of typecasting going on, perhaps.
Yeah.
For sure. But I'm very excited for this, small role, which, Zalme will be continuing performances until February 14th, Valentine's Day. I recommend going to the show possibly that day if you have, Valentine's Day plans where you want to see some...
some red. You want to see red? Yeah.
You want to see red. You want to see some blood. You want to see...
Ich hab dein Mund geküsst. I mean, that's just Valentine's Day,
And Jen Holloway does a fabulous job of, portraying that crazy, oh my God. It's just wild. Like when she takes, Nick's head, which really looks like his head, props to the props and costume department. But yeah, like she's just fabulous.
I'm going to be there on Friday, a little bit ahead of the Valentine's Day schedule, but knowing me, I'll probably be back because Zalame is one of my favorite operas, which should come as a surprise to none of our listeners. I love the blood and gore. Let's talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
So we're recording on February 2nd, and this coming Sunday, there is an event that a lot of people are going to watch. And I feel like
that is the wildest description of the Super Bowl I've ever heard in my life. But you're not wrong.
As a citizen of culture, or as a cultural citizen, we should prepare our listeners as best as we can. I'm excited about Bad Bunny. There's a certain move that he does sometimes that's very exciting for a gay man to watch. So hopefully he's going to do that for all the families watching at home. But I know there's some sports around the Bad Bunny performance, and we brought on Benjamin Sokol because I learned very early on after meeting him that he was a sports fan, and you're also from Boston, so you can help us handicap this matchup. First of all, can you tell us about like what to expect in this match? What's going to be exciting to pay attention to, and maybe a little bit about what you know about the Seattle team, since I assume your allegiance is with Boston.
Yes, my allegiance is 100% with the New England Patriots. But I will say that similar to our last Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks, in the mid 2010s, I want to say 2015, where we played against them. The Seahawks defense was made famous because they were called Legion of Boom. And similar to that, right now, the Seattle Seahawks defense was rated number 1 in the NFL. And against the young New England Patriots team that has no players from that era. The Tom Brady era is long over. We went through several seasons as New England fans, not winning a ton of games. And now with Drake May, leading the team, and Mike Vrabel, we're back in a good place to possibly, win this game. But the Seahawks are really a well-coached team. Sam Darnold is an excellent young quarterback. Does a great job of incorporating some, pass game, which isn't so popular, nowadays in the NFL. There's a lot of running quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold really knows how to throw the ball. He's got some excellent receivers who I'm sure will help out the offense. But my 2 cents, this game is going to be decided based on defense. This is a completely defense-forward game, and I think that whoever can stop these two fabulous, young but really committed great athlete quarterbacks, I think that's going to be the team that wins. And I hope that's, New England.
Well, our friend Ashley Hargrave, who would normally be in your role today, but she's unavailable today, might have something to say about the ownership of the teams. Is there anything you know about the ownership that might be a good comp for us in the non-sports community?
Yeah, at least the news right now is that the Seattle Seahawks may get bought out. We aren't sure yet if that means that the team is staying in Seattle. I hope that for Seattle fans that, that the owner ends up, keeping the team, whoever that owner may be in this next year. But the Seattle Seahawks ownership is going to be changing likely next year. Financial reasons, fan base, all that. I just hope that it's not the same fate as what happened to the Seattle Sonics, the basketball team that ended up becoming the Oklahoma City Thunder, and that, that Seattle can get it together. It's a great city from what I've been told, and, historic, amazing sports teams.
Benjamin, the way this works is clearly when we're not talking about tennis, we don't know anything about sports. So in order to choose a winner, what we do is analyze the operatic prowess of each respective city. And that is an infallible formula to determine who's going to win the big game this weekend. So, obviously, I think I want to save Boston for last because I think you're an expert on Boston. But first and foremost, Seattle opera, the opera scene in Seattle, I think, is largely grouped around the Seattle Opera, the one big opera company there.
Right.
Big West Coast powerhouse. I really love their programming, what they do there. I'm actually a big fan of their merch. One of my favorite shirts for a while was a t-shirt that says Fasold and Fafner General Contractors, which I think is very funny.
Very funny, very true.
What is your opinion of Seattle as an opera powerhouse?
From what I know about Seattle Opera, they do a lot of great German opera, obviously, a lot of Wagner. They've brought in a lot of superstars. One of the first recordings, I'm a bass-baritone, so obviously one of the first recordings I had to listen to when I was starting out in opera was, Fasold, Fafner, Hagen. I just had to listen to all these guys. And I think I heard Hagen's Watch, Morris Robinson, and I just hear this lush, rich kind of sound coming out of this, low bass. And I was just enamored. I've been a Wagner fan since I started out, in opera, obviously with my teacher, James Morris. He got me hooked onto the Wagner thing fast.
He would do that.
he would do that. But I've heard a lot of great things about their programming, German opera. But then I believe this season they're also doing Fellow Travelers, which, they're incorporating a lot of really great new opera over there. Yeah,
they have Fellow Travelers, and I think they're doing a world premiere with Huang Ro, who's a friend of the show. Is it the Wedding Banquet in January? They just announced that. Yeah, and I believe that they just did Pirates of Penzance, or they did Pirates of Penzance earlier in the fall. I think we were talking about that show, and we learned about their season.
Really angling for the George Cedarquist vote over there.
Yeah, but Fellow Travelers is definitely on our mind. We just spoke to Joseph Latanzi, who sings Hawkins all over the place. And we also talked to Gregory Spears recently. So we are definitely big advocates of Fellow Travelers. So that's in the plus column for me. But let's talk about the scene in Boston. It's funny because when I was coming up in my training, they always said that Boston was an oratorio town, that you don't really have that much opera in Boston. And that what I really discovered there is that they love early music there. And you do have the Handel and Haydn Society and a bunch of these chamber groups and the Boston Early Music Festival, which I'm a big fan of. And a friend of the show, Amanda Forsyth, just won a Grammy for her album with Boston Early Music Festival, Telemont Arias. So my heart is in Boston. What do you have to say about Boston?
I loved growing up in Boston and the music scene. I will say, though, my years that I was living in Boston, opera was not at the forefront of my mind. But now that I've learned more about, the opera scene, obviously, Boston Lyric does a lot of fabulous stuff.
Do they?
They do. With Mahler Symphony No. 3, I know that they're doing, and they did.
I didn't know that was an opera.
Yeah, they're doing Mahler 3.
It is in Boston.
It is in Boston. One of my first experiences when I was must have been 6th grade, the Handel and Haydn Society came in to present for all of us. I didn't really know much about opera or classical singing. I was a choral singer, and my parents met because they were choral singers. So I always, I was just intrigued, but I was like, who's this Handel guy? And that was actually maybe the first moment that I was hooked into thinking about opera and what, like, the kind of sounds coming out of these people's mouths. But the Boston opera scene is it's definitely a niche, I will say.
Yeah, it's so strange because when I was growing up, it was always like poo-pooed as like it's not an opera place. But I mean, the Boston Lyric Opera does exist. Odyssey Opera does a lot of great work. I was there. I briefly lived in Boston just for a few months, and it's such a great music city. But opera has always been at the fringes, but in a way that I, as a contrarian, kind of love. You're going to see stuff you are not going to see in other places in Boston. They got, there's another little company called Guerrilla Opera that does a lot of weird stuff that I'm very into. It's such an interesting way to compare cities, especially with Seattle, where it's all so concentrated and centralized in this larger company versus, this very dynamic and, sort of up-and-comer, maybe almost underdoggy sort of element in Boston Opera. Maybe not so reflected in the actual football team, but I think it is a kind of an interesting matchup mentally. I've been thinking about this for the past several days, and it really is a dynamic and interesting scene, but you do kind of have to dig to find it.
Well, let's add a little something to this conversation. So New England Patriots, does Boston claim the Patriots, or is it more of like a pan New England, team?
It's definitely a pan New England thing, because actually, the New England Patriots the New England Patriots are from Foxborough, Massachusetts. That's where the Gillette Stadium is, which Foxborough, Massachusetts is about halfway in between Boston and Providence. So especially all the Rhode Island residents really like to claim the New England Patriots as their team too. And I actually have some friends in Rhode Island that opt to be New York baseball fans, but when it comes to football, they're very loyal to the New England Patriots. So it's interesting how geographically people pick their teams, but definitely a pan, New England team. So
do we need to investigate the Foxborough opera scene?
Ooh, I think someone's got to create that.
Well, I think it's thematically appropriate. It's all on the fringes, right? There's lots of little cool stuff. If you are listening right now, you know about the Foxborough opera scene, let us know. Mailbag at operaboxscore.com.
Let's just bring this to conclusion by saying that Seattle has got, their one big house that we know about and the quality work that they do. And New England has got a bunch of little weapons, right? So is that any kind of comp for? No, not big.
I think that's similar to the Super Bowl. I think it all sort of ties in.
I did
because I think that Seattle has a full defense of I would say that every one of those guys on their team. Solid defensive player, but Boston has New England has a lot of weapons. I think that people sleep on Hunter Henry, our tight end, and we got a lot of great players. So
this is the final call based purely on operatic merits. What do the two of you think it's going to be? I'm leaning towards Patriots personally, but not to influence you. Oliver, who do you think is going to take it?
I'm going to have to go with my Baroque peeps and go with Foxborough.
Benjamin, Foxborough, or Seattle?
Oof. I have high hopes for the opera scene in Foxborough. I'm waiting for the company.
All right. Well, we've really set ourselves up to be embarrassed if Seattle wins, but that's just how it rolls. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, click follow on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign, find a friend who loves opera and or sports, and force them to listen at gunpoint. Time for a free throw.
Free throw.
On February 14th, my full-length interview with Denyce Graves will air on my other job on WFMT. It took me a lot of legwork to score that interview. As you know, Denyce Graves, as soon as she began announcing her retirement, literally everybody wanted to talk to her, and the PR has been incredible. She's been on CBS Morning News. She's been on NPR. She's been in the New York Times twice, and I'm sure there are a bunch of other outlets that captured interviews with her as she said farewell to her opera career, officially last Saturday, January 24th. So after talking with her for like 30 minutes for my other job, we had about 9 minutes left, and we're going to hear the first 6 minutes right now. But let's remember one of her greatest performances of all time, singing to Elmo on Sesame Street. Denyce Graves, we just recorded an interview for my other job, and I have you for 5 more minutes, and I have to ask you about some of these things you've been saying on your PR blitz these last couple of weeks. So much spicy things that make me so excited to talk about you. I'll start with the body, and you have been very frank about just, we think of you as this athlete. You were like one of the most dynamic stage performers with this like indestructible voice, but you're saying now in this press blitz that you were vulnerable and that you were fragile and you had to cope with that.
So often I was not sure that I was built for this industry. I was not sure that I had the right heart for the industry, because there's making music, and then there's the business of music making. And they're very different. And, I've portrayed a lot of really strong and powerful women, and I've enjoyed that. That's been a lot of fun for me. But they've also been very instructive to me. I have learned, I say that someday, I want to write about the Denyce that Carmen made, because I don't think it was an accident that she and I have had the long walk that we've had. I felt like there was a lot that I had to learn from her as a woman, as an individual, and she certainly taught me a lot. And I felt that Denyce, the woman, got groomed under her, sort of guardianship. But I'm super tenderhearted. I have always been that way. I wish a lot of times that I weren't, but that's the way I was crafted, and so far. And oftentimes I find myself in situations where, the emotions sort of take over, and I would prefer to be much more sober. I would prefer to be much more level-headed, and I'm stoic, and I'm often overcome by emotion itself. And I realize that that's an important element for music making. I think that the emotions have to be available in order to do the work. But it also means that because I have such an open heart, that you can get hurt a lot and hurt more often. And I certainly that's been a lot of my life experience. But I think we're here for our hearts to get broken, and to grow our capacity to love, and to strengthen who we are. And so the road that I've been on has been showing and has been teaching me that. But I have often wished that I was a different kind of person, and that I was made of different kind of material. But I am incredibly soft and vulnerable.
Well, I'll let our audience find the interviews you did with New York Times, or even the essay that you wrote for New York Times about like the thyroid and, stuff like that, which is, I just, as I said, like when I was coming up, listening to you sing, it's like, this is just like, she's an athlete, you know? And it was so, to us, to me, and I think to my peers, it's like, we all need to be this strong. But pivoting to something else you said in your recent press blitz, something that really struck me, and it's something I want to talk about. You said that at the table, like in the arts administration world, you felt like there was a silent reminder that you are a guest here. And I've said this to my audience, they're not going to be surprised that like I am a brown gay man in the arts administration world. And you would think that because I have one identity that seems to have cash in this industry, that I'd have entrance, but there is still glass ceilings for me, and I think it has to do with my brownness. I don't know if that's what you meant, or if you were talking about being a singer and not being taken seriously as a leader administrator.
All of the above, but I will say this: I never felt like, I had have a very strong mother who taught us every day, my brother, my sister, myself, that every place we walked into, we belonged there. And that our being here, our being called to this time in history was an absolute intentional act on the act of God or the creator or whomever you believe. And so I always believed that how other people, what they thought about me was not my business, was none of my concern. It didn't mean that you didn't feel it and that things weren't said. They certainly were all the time and still are. But I know that I have something unique and important to offer this world, this life, this profession. And so I've not been detracted from what I have sometimes been confronted with. So, whatever people thought about me was none of my business. My job was to do my work, and I was not going to be distracted from that.
So I turned off my professional microphone right then, but I kept the Zoom audio recording, not because I was trying to trick her and get her to say more things that I was going to add to the podcast, but just because I didn't stop it. And she went on and gave me a couple extra minutes that I think she thought was going to be off mic. And I did get her consent to add this last sort of outtake, which I thought was really impactful. And she just sounds so authentic here. So I wanted everybody to hear it.
I feel like somehow your, explosion into the world aligned with my beginning to become passionate about music. I was in school in the 90s, and like you were there. And I was like so excited by the prospect of, somebody like you who has this instrument, but also who just stage beast, like giving everything and making it so visceral. And I mean, that was what the press said. Like when you came out, like, we've never had this, like it was a new thing,
I'm happy about that because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, and I still want to be honest and to tell the truth. I think you've got one opportunity, and either people believe you or they don't, right? And so I always wanted to come at it with my whole heart. I always wanted to leave blood on the stage. I always felt that if I didn't really, give myself, what's that wonderful song? Give me your heart, make it real, or else forget about it. So all of the things that I do, whether it's being a wife, whether that's being a mother, whether it's being a good friend, whether it's being a daughter, whatever it is, I've always believed that go into it and live your life fully and go into the whole experience, no matter what happens or what might happen, but do it for real. And so that's sort of been the leitmotif and the sort of credo of my living. Apart from singing, like just do this for real, the whole way, do it the way. And so I love fiercely. I mean, if I love you, I just, I love you forever. And it's really important to me that, I was speaking to a girlfriend of mine, and she's like, I can't believe you went all out of your way to go do this and take this, to a whole other state to this person. I said, what are we doing here otherwise? What are we doing? I mean, this is it. This is all we get. This is what we get. And it's what we make it. And it's what we make it to be. So if you love somebody, I want my friends and the people that I want them to say that they've never been loved so much, or that, for my husband to say that I'm the greatest lover he's ever known, because that's important to me, to give of myself and to have a real full experience here. That's what I think. And I want that in return. I mean, I want that in return. And I believe that love is so incredibly important. And I mean, look at what's going on in the world today. It's just amazing on a daily basis, the amount of outrage and shock that's happening from moment to moment. And our time here is fine. I mean, Kathleen O'Hara passed yesterday. We all love her so much. She's so funny, so wonderful. And I think we have it every day that we're alive and we're breathing. We have an opportunity to love more, to love better, to love deeper, and that's what I want to do. That's how I want to live my life.
That's how I want to live my life. Denyce Graves and all the people who helped me coordinate that interview, thank you so much. We know that there's so much of Denyce Graves we have in our future as a mentor, as an arts administrator, as a stage director. But yes, the singing, we're going to have to just enjoy the recordings and keep hitting replay on that Sesame Street clip.
I always do listen to a lot. I mean, truly, that Sesame Street has some of the great performances, I think, of our time. She will be missed, but also not missed, because she will be with us always. It sounds like she died. She did not. Let us do the 2-minute drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
An article in the New York Times examines why the Kennedy Center's new leadership is fundamentally at odds with the standard business model for U.S. opera companies. The center's mandate that every performance break even through ticket sales and corporate sponsorships ignores the donation-based model of funding endemic to nonprofit arts institutions. KC President Rick Grinnell, on the other hand, claims that performers were being paid on State Department contracts in the past or government funds to go perform because they could not get a supply and demand audience. They couldn't participate in capitalism. Maybe they have a niche talent that is interesting. They play an interesting type of banjo.
Following the recent cancellation by Renee Fleming, Philip Glass has also canceled the world premiere of his 15th Symphony at the Kennedy Center. Quote, Symphony number 15 is a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, and the values of the Kennedy Center today are in direct conflict with the message of the symphony, Glass said on social media.
Last month, the center announced the hiring of Kevin Crouch as Senior Vice President of Artistic Programming, only to reveal that he had already resigned less than 2 weeks later on January 28th. Yesterday, Donald Trump announced that the Kennedy Center would be closed down for 2 years, starting July 4th, for renovations to rebuild the theater. The remaining artists and organizations who have still been planning to perform at the center over the course of the next 2 years were reportedly not warned before the president's announcement on Truth Social.
Our friends of the show at Opera Wire report that the name of French conductor and composer Frédéric Chazelain appears at least 376 times in the latest batch of Epstein files going back to 2012. The emails include complaints from Chazelain about the world, quote, chasing men at the height of the Me Too movement, and Chazelain knowing, quote, all about James Levine since the 80s. There are also mentions of, quote, again, private visits, and at least one named woman Chazelain appeared to want to introduce to Epstein. The conductor has not been accused of any legal wrongdoing.
Opera companies are standing in solidarity with protesters following the public executions of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Minnesota Opera said, while we know that gathering together to experience something beautiful like an opera can be a source of communal healing, we also know that moments of healing must be paired with tangible care. By showing up with and for each other, may we find light, strength, and the power of coming together. WNO shared the statement on social media, adding, we stand with our colleagues at Minnesota Opera and with all those impacted by the heartbreaking events unfolding in Minnesota. Our thoughts are with everyone affected.
In major awards news, the Grammy winners have been announced. The 2026 Best Opera Recording is Jake Heggie's Intelligence with Houston Grand Opera, Kwame Ryan conducting. Jamie Barton, Janai Bridges, and friend of the show, Janae Brugger, are all featured on that album. Best Classical Solo Vocal Album was awarded to Boston Early Music Festival's Telemann Eno opera arias for soprano with friend of the show, Amanda Forsyth.
The shortlist for the 2026 Royal Philharmonic Society Awards has been announced. Nominated singers include Christine Rice, Louise Alder, and Masbane Cecilia Rangwanasha. Festin from the Royal Ballet and Opera, Uprising from Glyndebourne, and Woman Life Song from Birmingham Opera Company were nominated in the opera category, and my darling Hugh Cutting was nominated in the Young Artist category.
In trade news, friend of the show James Gaffigan's contract with Komische Oper Berlin has been extended through 2030, and Hungarian conductor Levente Türk has been appointed General Music Director of Theater Aachen starting this August.
Crunching the numbers, Opera America has released its 2025 annual field report. Key takeaways include a 4% increase in the number of distinct operas produced in the country, as well as a 7% increase in world premieres. There was also a 2% increase in performances since the previous year, though the number of actual productions dropped by 4%. Opera America emphasized that the last few years have shown opera companies excelling at getting first-timers to an opera house and reiterated the importance of turning those first-timers into repeat customers. Opera America itself is apparently doing well financially, showing a much stronger fiscal year than anticipated thanks in part to a $500,000 grant from Dr. M. Lee Pierce Foundation.
On the disabled list, following the taping of last week's episode, Roberto Alagna made headlines again when he suddenly became ill during a performance of Turandot at the Royal Ballet and Opera, causing him to withdraw before the third act. The company's head of music, pianist and conductor Richard Hetherington, jumped in for Alagna in his street clothes. Unfortunately, Hetherington did not feel up to singing Nessun Dorma, which prompted boos from the audience.
Johann Cavalaga also became ill on stage during a performance as Leporello at Theater Chemnitz. The bass was rushed to a hospital and reportedly recovered quickly. Dresden Staatsoper member Markus Marquardt, who had been watching the performance from the audience, sang the rest of the performance from the wings.
And on this day, February 2nd in 1633, was the first performance of Michelangelo Rossi's Ermina sul Giordano in Rome. In 1687, Carlo Pallavicino's La Gerusalemme Liberata at the Hoftheater in Dresden had its premiere. In 1731, Handel's opera Porro, which ran for 16 performances, had its first performance. In 1900, it was the first performance of the most important opera of all time, Gustave Charpentier's opera Louise at the Opera Comique in Paris. In 1921, Louis Breton's opera The Evening Star had its premiere in Romania.
Birthdays on this day include Castrato Girolamo Crescentini, born this day in 1762. He created roles in operas by Cimarosa and Cherubini. Isabella Colbran, the great mezzo-soprano, was born this day in 1785. She created too many roles that can be named here. Also, a lot of credits go to Domenico Donzelli, born this day in 1790 in Bergamo, creating the role of Pollione in Norma, and operas by Donizetti, Mercadante,
Rossini,
Pacini,
Bertin, Halévy, everybody.
Just everybody. In 1869, baritone Jean Perrier was born in Paris. He created the role of Pelléas in Debussy's Palais Melisande. In 1873, on this day, Leopold Fall, an operetta composer, was born. In 1990, it was the birth of Lisa Della Casa, the Swiss soprano. Maura Moreira, Brazilian mezzo-soprano, was born this day in 1934. She sang in the premiere of Zimmermann's Die Soldaten. And happy birthday to OBS Hall of Famer, the great American soprano Martina Arroyo, born this day, February 2nd, in 1937.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Just a little bit of the birthday girl, Martina Arroyo, singing music by the birthday boy. That was from a concert in 1967 in Amsterdam. Depuis le jour from Louise.
I just want to say for the record that I wanted to play Martina Arroyo singing the 1965 recording of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's Momenta, but someone said no. I think you can all guess who that was.
Well, yeah, when you can celebrate two birthdays at once, why not? And
That's so true. That's so true.
Benjamin, have you ever had any Martina Arroyo's master classes or gone to her Inside the Role program, whatever it's called?
No, I actually haven't. I saw Martina Arroyo one year at one of the Cheryl Milne's voice programs galas in New York City, but I never got to actually, at least yet to date, I haven't seen her teach.
She's an incredible teacher, and she's also a total card. It's real fun to experience her work. So,
you know what's less fun is everything happening at the Kennedy Center. This is the story that truly keeps on giving, but maybe not for much longer. So first and foremost, I wanted to, reiterate, kind of what has happened in just the last, couple of weeks. I mean, they hired this new VP of programming whose, I think, previous big association was as like the manager for Vanilla Ice or something like that, which is very funny. And then less than 2 weeks later, he's gone. Don't know why. Could possibly be because Donald Trump has decided that he wants to, he says do renovations, but he's also used the verb rebuild Kennedy Center, which is ominous in light of what he did to the East Wing of the White House. So certainly things are not looking good. And also I do feel bad too, because the Washington Symphony Orchestra had this whole statement, I think maybe a week and a half ago.
The National Symphony Orchestra.
National Symphony Orchestra, yes, excuse me. Had this whole statement about how they were going to stay. They weren't being, censored specifically, and it was important to like maintain sort of this through line. And then, like everyone else, they seem to have not been informed until Donald Trump apparently just kind of essentially tweeted out that, he was going to be ending the Kennedy Center for 2 years, starting in the middle of the summer season. So I mean, I see Benjamin, you're just sitting there shaking your head and like, I get it, man.
I just, as a young artist, I'm mainly feeling for, my colleagues there at the K Fritz Young Artist Program. And I just feel for Washington, D.C. arts. I have family over there in D.C. who, were supporting the Kennedy Center. And I feel for the art scene there. And I wish that it wasn't crumbling. It just seems to be getting worse and worse, the situation. And DC Arts, there's such a long history there of amazing artists performing in the nation's capital, and it's just a shame to see that disappearing.
It's a real bummer. I think this interview with Rick Grinnell, where he says he does this whole, song and dance about the arts not being able to compete in capitalism, which I think is actually honestly really revealing, and I think has long-term implications aside from Rick Grinnell being Rick Grinnell. The mindset of the dominant wing of politics, at least in the United States on the national level right now, does seem to be enamored with this idea of if you cannot compete, you are, financially speaking, you are not worthy of being heard in any way. And this has been, I think, the tension that opera has experienced from the very beginning, from back, in the days of, Louis the 14th, giving Lully the sole right to create operas at Versailles, right? But there's something so chilling about seeing it said out loud, especially when, at least for my lifetime, and I think, ever since, probably the middle of the last century, we have relied on donations from the wealthy, from people who don't necessarily have the, most avant-garde, artsy, speaking directly to people, interests at heart, but also we completely depend on their goodwill. And if this is truly the dominant attitude amongst the people who are the movers and shakers.
Well, one of the things that he says in his, like, what we should be programming, so-called common sense programming.
What does that even mean?
There should be family-friendly things like Dogman. Like, Dogman, isn't that a cartoon? Like,
I mean, Dogman is, I don't know about Dave Pilkey's politics, but I don't think he's on the same side as Donald Trump. There's something.
No, but what is Dogman? Isn't Dogman a cartoon? He's
a children's book series.
Okay.
The same creator as Captain Underpants, which came out when I was a kid. So you were already 65, I think, when that that happened. But yeah, no, Dogman is very entertaining. I will say that. Again, I don't know Dave Pilkey's
But is there a
politics,
live action Dogman, or is it like just a guy,
I'm sure
a guy in a
is.
suit or something like that? Okay.
My nephew is a big Dogman fan. I'll get him on the podcast next week and we can interrogate him.
Well, once Dogman is actually at the Kennedy Center, we'll be an expert panelist. So
perfect. Yeah, there's something about the attitude that the arts are not worth it if they can't sell tickets.
It's just the language that he uses, supply and demand. That's not how we talk in like arts administration talk. And that's
I think that, there is a tension there, and I think we're reaching a kind of a breaking point there, which is why alternative sources of funding for the arts, especially opera, are of paramount importance for the long-term survival of the genre, at least in this country. If you're in Western Europe, you've still got the state subsidies and stuff, but even with, Arts Council England defunding things, it's a mess. There's a lot of bad news this week. Another piece of bad news is, of course, the Epstein files with this conductor. There are names that appear. I mean, Epstein, as we have learned in very dramatic fashion as these files have been released, has a massive social circle. Not every single person whose name appears in the files is necessarily, a criminal, but 300 plus mentions. And some of the quotes in the Opera Wire article that you read are, shall we say, concerning. For some reason, I don't know, there's been so much happening politically and in the music world over the past, year and a bit. And indeed the past decade, that it just didn't occur to me that we might start seeing artists, operatic artists' names in here, but of course there would be. What have I learned since the Me Too movement? That this has been a problem all along. But there's almost a pit in my stomach about what else might come out, as these go. And then, of course, because the administration is so invested in nothing ever being done to hold people accountable, will they just simply be there with the rest of us,
He's conductor for albums by Benjamin Bernheim and Ludovic Tezier and Sonia Yancheva and Rachel Willis Sorensen. So, he's got his fingers in a lot of pies.
He's a big deal, and it's unfortunate. Rough stuff. Benjamin, are you regretting coming on the show yet?
Just been a rough week. Nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about the Grammys. That's always fun.
Yeah.
We got lots of friends of the show in the Grammy winners this week. And
there were a lot of friends of the show that were nominated, but somehow when these results came out and vocal categories seemed to not really be important to the categories where it wasn't specifically vocal.
Yeah, exactly. That was going to be my sort of note as well. There were a lot more nominees for vocal artists who did not really, rise to the top. And, again, it's the Grammys. There are, I don't know what the voting process is for the Grammys, especially when you're talking about, classical albums, because it always seems like a bit of a crapshoot to me to predict who's going to win whatever category. Even beyond my usual complaints of like, why are you just, nominating a DVD instead of a CD? Why wasn't, the Boston, speaking of Boston, Benjamin, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Lady Beth of Mtsensk that came out this year. Why was that not nominated? That was my number one album of the year from a performance perspective and also from an engineering perspective. And yet here we are. Maybe it's another disappointment.
Yeah. So what did win that had vocal performances in it were Gabriela Ortiz's, I guess, oratorio Yanga with LA Phil and I think LA Master Singers, conducted by Gustavo Dudamel. And that was it, apart from the ones we already mentioned. Congrats to a friend of the show, Amanda Forsyth. I saw her sing Eno in performance at this past festival in 2025, and it is incredible. So anybody who can sing that many notes in one evening should get, at the minimum, a Grammy Award. And Jake Hagee's Intelligence with friend of the show, Janai Brugger and Janae Bridges and Jamie Barton, who aren't friends of the show yet. But I think when that show was being performed at Houston, we talked about that day that they had like kids in the audience and they were like cheering for, there's like some like violence against women that goes wrong for the offender or it goes wrong for the violator, like where there's like on stage justice happens, and the kids were all cheering. So I haven't seen this show, but yeah, congratulations to friend of the show, Jake Hagee.
No enemies of the show won, as far as we know. Let's talk a little bit about some, maybe some good numbers, maybe not like extraordinary numbers, but the Opera America field report for 2025 has some interesting results in it. Obviously, we talked about how there's 4% increase in distinct titles, so there's more variety happening over the last year than the previous year. Fewer productions, but more performances. That's not nothing. There were a large increase in North American premieres, which I'm a very big fan of. What we didn't mention was that they also ranked the 5 most produced North American titles and top 5 most produced titles overall. So the most produced North American titles would be Amal and the Night Visitors, not shocked. Florencia en el Amazonas, also
Yay.
Not shocking. It's been on a real run lately. Book of Mountains and Seas by Wang Ro.
That's weird. I saw that. I am surprised.
I mean, I'm not surprised because they've been doing a lot of productions on tour and stuff, and I really like that one a lot. Scalia Ginsburg kind of surprised me. And Glory Denied I know nothing about.
Have you, Benjamin? You know it?
I've heard a lot of the arias from Glory Denied because they're becoming part of standard aria packages for a lot of young artists. One of my best friends sings the baritone aria from it. So it's really stunning music. But I've never seen a full production.
Well,
just to clarify, those were top titles
from North America,
by North American, So,
whereas the top 5 most produced titles is less interesting. It's Bohème, Carmen, Butterfly, Barbara Seville, Don Giovanni, La Traviata. Nothing shocking there. But I do think that the analysis of the new audiences is very pertinent. I think it's very exciting to see that, there is a real accomplishment in getting new people to the opera, because I feel like that was always the hurdle when I was young, is like, getting people to care at all and like, even see it as desirable to go. But of course, turning that into repeat listeners is always a challenge, right?
Exactly.
So I think that, it's exciting to see progress in a way that I think we haven't seen in a while, especially when we've had nothing but bad news, it seems like, for the past, decade or so.
I mean, I don't want to poo-poo on these numbers, but they all seem like they're within the margin of error, if there is such a thing with this type of study, like there's not giant numbers, so.
Yeah, we'll see how they bear out, and but I think there is reason for a little bit of hope, a little bit of lightness. Before we wrap up here, I want to just ask a question to you both. Are we just not hiring covers anymore? What is going on at the Royal Ballet and Opera and Theater Chemnitz, where they're just having people in the audience, the the music director has to come on and sing?
I think the thing is that once the performance starts, maybe the cover is off the hook, But I don't know. Are you covering anything right now, Benjamin?
So I am. As it happens, because I'm performing Fifth Jew in Salome, I'm also covering First Nazarene. So I'm in the production. But I'll tell you, when I just covered in Medea, I covered Captain of the Guard.
Yeah.
And I had to be on call at all times in case, I was never off the hook. We have a policy at Lyric that like you just got to be there just in case. You have to be in a specific radius. You have to be able to get to the theater if need be. So I don't know what's going on over there in Europe, but at Lyric, our covers definitely do a lot of work, and our covers hop into rehearsals when need be, when people, fall ill with flu, colds, all that stuff going around right now.
Yeah, it's very strange. I don't know anything about Theater Chemnitz's size or ability to have covers, but I am surprised that the, RBO didn't have anyone other than someone who is evidently not a singer. He's a conductor and a pianist. And I wouldn't want to sing Nessun Dorma either.
I don't know. I would have been very interested to see how that would have gone.
Well, just to clarify, we don't have the real picture of what happened because there's conflicting stories about what happened. There's one story that says that Heather Rington, whatever his name is, sang it from the wings. And there's another story that said he actually was still in his street clothes and just walked the part and sang some things, but didn't sing Nessun Dorma, which caused the audience to really be upset. So, and
also this was also for Roberto Alagna, who famously will cancel in the middle of a show if he's not feeling it. So I applaud him. I know a lot of people booed, and I know that Nessun Dorma is a lot of the reason people go to Turandot, but I think it's brave what he did. I don't know what went wrong to make that happen, but if nothing else, it's brave. And sometimes in 2026, that's what you need. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. That's how we end the show around these parts. I'm going to start with Oliver Camacho.
So I saw the prima of Così fan tutte yesterday, and it's really hard for me because I never have liked a production of Così. I love this opera. We've talked about it before. It's my all-time favorite opera, but I've never seen a version of it that was satisfying. And I've got to say that this concept in this production is 90% there. I can do without the second act finale, but leading up to the second act finale, it's a pretty solid production, and it's funny, and the cast is so good. I think the highlight I thought was going to be Anthony Leon because I'm in love with his voice, and he was great. But who stole the show was this Italian mezzo, Cecilia Molinari, and I'm working with her management to get her on the show as soon as possible. I want to talk to her while she's in Chicago. Of course, friend of the show, Jacqueline Stucker as Fiordiligi, and friend of the show, Anna Maria Martinez as Despina, and Ian Rucker, not yet a friend of the show, but everybody's sweetheart, was just hilarious and so gorgeous as Guglielmo. And Rod Gilfrey as Don Alfonso, and then, of course, conducted by music director and friend of the show, Enrique Mazzola. If you are in Chicago for the next 2 weeks and you have time, if you have 4 hours to spare, check out Così fan tutte. It's sort of like a White Lotus Così fan tutte.
Benjamin Sokol, you have a call for us?
Yeah, I'll add on to that with the Così fan tutte. We have a lot of interesting things going on at Lyric right now. And I'll plug for a second our production of Salome, which is not to be missed here at Lyric. Nicholas Brownlee, I will say, good call for Lyric to bring in this guy. Wow. I mean, I'd heard recordings of him. I had heard stories from friends, but this is a full-throated, exciting voice that can totally meet the demands of Johanna Ahn, which is obviously in the bass baritone repertoire, one of the hardest feats to tackle. And go Lyric Opera, go casting for bringing in a fabulous cast featuring Nick Brownlee.
I have a bad call, whatever the opposite of a major award is. Apparently for the Oscars coming up, some musical selections in the Best Original Song category will not be broadcast, including Sweet Dreams of Joy from the documentary Viva Verdi, which is why we care on this program. That's about it's a documentary about the famous Casa Verdi retirement home for opera singers. The only performances apparently are going to be Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters, which is admittedly a bop, and I Lied to You, also a bop from Sinners, but still, bad call to the Academy. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, get your voice heard, and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Our announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is me. The executive producer of the OBS is George Cedarquist. For guest panelists Benjamin Sokol and Denyce Graves, I'm Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera while striving to be the greatest lover ever known. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go inside the huddle with Andrei Filionchek, the star of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more interesting banjos. Join us.